The very first college football playoff rankings will be out tomorrow night, and I'm going to give you my projections on what those rankings will look like, and we'll see what the committee does. I don't think they're necessarily going to do what they should do, but again, I'm trying to predict what they will do. For example, BYU should absolutely be in the top four. I've studied the resumes, I've looked at this. Done all my research. BYU, if they go by their criteria, BYU should be in the top four, but I don't think they're going to put them in the top four. I'm going to give you, again, my projections here based off of what I think the committee's going to do, and it is different year to year. Sometimes they value your wins more. Sometimes they care more about who you lost to, and they penalize teams more for losing to bad teams. I think where Notre Dame is ranked is going to be very interesting. Do they penalize them for that Northern Illinois loss, or do they kind of forgive that or count that the same as these other teams' loss? That'll be interesting to see. But again, this is my best guess as to what they're going to do. I've done this in the past, and I've done some things that were much different in the AP and coaches polls, and people called me crazy. We saw the playoff rankings for that first time, and I turned out to be pretty accurate. Again, I can't promise that's going to be the case this year because the committee does seem to change each year, but I do think that once we get these first rankings, we'll kind of know what this specific group of people, this committee, is looking for in terms of ranking these teams. So let's get right to it. We're going to start at the bottom, and here is 21 through 25. And so I believe that Missouri will be right there at number 25. We talked about this last week, and it may have just been in the comments of the video that I did last week. Missouri really doesn't deserve to be ranked. They beat Vanderbilt and they beat Boston College. I mean, that's it. But I just don't see any teams behind them. Vanderbilt's actually a team that I considered because they do have the win over Alabama, but they've got a bad loss to Georgia State. They've got a third loss, and they also lost to Missouri. So I don't think you can justify putting Vanderbilt in there. Again, just looking at these teams, Syracuse has a win over UNLV. They're a two-loss team. I don't think Army is going to be ranked. They have no resume. I don't think the committee will rank them. So I've got Missouri at 25, Colorado ahead of them. A win over a three-loss Cincinnati, a four-loss Baylor. That's really about all they've got. But again, I talked about this, and again, it may have been in the comments of one of my videos. There are only maybe 22 teams that deserve to be ranked. I mean, it's you got to fill these spots with somebody. Kansas State, number 23, wins over Colorado, who I've got ranked. I do think they'll be ranked. A win over a pretty good Tulane team, also a win over a four-loss West Virginia. And you're going to hear me talk about four-loss teams and think, why should you get credit for that? Well, in the past, the committee has kind of given teams credit for piling up wins against 500 teams. Maybe teams that when we're talking about at the end of the year, teams that finish 6-6 or 7-5. If you got a bunch of those wins, the committee does give you credit, or at least they have in the past. So you're going to hear me actually talk about four-loss teams, even though I personally don't think you should get a ton of credit for that. Clemson at 22. Boy, they don't have any quality wins. They've beaten NC State, Wake Forest, and Virginia. Those are four-loss teams. They don't have any wins over a one-loss team, two-loss team, or a three-loss team. But you look at their losses, and they lost to Louisville, who you will see in a second. I do have Louisville ranked. And then they lost to Georgia, who's going to be in the top 5. So I think they're going to get some credit for losing to really good teams and only having 2 losses. South Carolina at number 21, the win over Texas A&M. I think that's why they're going to be there. They don't have any bad losses either. They've lost to good teams. So I think South Carolina, with 3 losses, does get into this ranking, and I've got them at number 21. Another 3-loss team coming up here, and that's Louisville at number 20. Just mentioned them. I think they're going to be ranked. And again, we're going to find out if this committee cares more about who you lost to or who you beat. They've got the win over Clemson. They've got wins over Georgia Tech, Boston College, Virginia. Again, 4-loss teams, not great, but the committee has valued those types of wins in the past. But you look at who they've lost to. They lost to SMU, who is potentially top 10. They lost to Notre Dame. They lost to Notre Dame. They are potentially top 10 as well. So we're talking about losing to really solid teams. They haven't lost to any bad teams. and I think the committee is going to give them some credit for that. And I think you're going to see Louisville in here with 3 losses. I think you're going to see them ranked even with the 3 losses, unless the committee is really looking for those quality wins. And if that's the case, then I don't really think they'll have Louisville ranked. But I think they get in there at number 20. Miami was the other team that they lost to. So yeah, an undefeated Miami, a 1-loss SMU, and a 1-loss Notre Dame. They've only lost 2 really good teams, and so that's why I have them there. 19 is Washington State. You look at this team, and again, I think they're going to give them some credit. Their 1 loss coming to Boise State. They've got to win over Texas Tech, a 3-loss team who just beat Iowa State, got a big win this past weekend, and also a 4-loss Washington team. Iowa State comes in at number 18. They've got to win over Iowa. That's a decent win. Baylor, West Virginia, they beat those teams as well. But just the 1 loss, and I think that's why Iowa State does wind up in these rankings, because I think they'll get some credit for only losing 1 game. Pittsburgh at number 17, a win over a 2-loss Syracuse, a 3-loss Cincinnati. Then they piled up wins against 4-loss teams, West Virginia, Cal, North Carolina, and Pitt lost to a very good SMU team. So I think they'll be ranked. Ole Miss at number 16, 2 losses. To good teams. Well, Kentucky not really. It looks like Kentucky's not very good, but the other loss coming to LSU. They've got a win over a 3-loss South Carolina team, and another team that's gotten some wins over 4-loss teams: Wake Forest, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and they've looked really impressive in some of these games. The South Carolina game, the Arkansas game. I think the committee will give them some credit for those wins, and I think they'll put them at number 16. But I don't think they'll be ahead of LSU because of the head-to-head. I think that's why Texas A&M is ahead of LSU. With the Tigers up LSU at number 15, you look at, another thing is, what does the committee do with like the loss to USC? You look at it now and it seems like, well, that was a terrible loss, but USC played pretty good football at the beginning of the season. Now they've had a ton of injuries. They've also lost a ton of close games. So I don't know how much they'll penalize them for that loss. That will be interesting to see. And then, of course, losing to Texas A&M on the road, that was a tough one there. But they've got a win over Ole Miss, a win over South Carolina, win over Arkansas. Those are all pretty good wins. Texas A&M ahead of them. The wins over Missouri and LSU, that's 2 wins over 2-loss teams. Also wins over Florida and Arkansas. Pretty good resume for the Aggies. And then, of course, losing to a really good Notre Dame team. Another loss coming to South Carolina, who is in my top 25, or in my projected top 25. Alabama, number 13, the win over Georgia is huge. Also a win over a ranked 2-loss Missouri team, a ranked South Carolina team. Also beat a 4-loss Wisconsin team. Those are pretty solid wins, and they don't have a bad loss. Vanderbilt, just outside the top 25, but that's not a horrible loss there. And then a loss to Tennessee, who's going to be the top 10. And then we've got Boise State, number 12. Again, it comes down to the losses or the wins. They lost to the I don't want to give it away, but I guess I just did. The number 1 team will be Oregon in this projection, and that's really not a surprise. But they lost to that team in a close game. So does the committee say, wow, Boise State's a really good team? We've seen that based off of that game. They've got wins over Washington State and UNLV. Not great wins, but those are solid wins. I do have Washington State projected in this top 25. So Boise State right there at number 12. I think that's where they will wind up. Notre Dame at number 11. The Navy win doesn't look as good now after Navy just lost again. The Texas A&M win is good. The Louisville win is good. A couple of ranked wins there. The Georgia Tech win is decent also. But what do they do with that loss? That loss in Northern Illinois. That is what, probably that ranking. The ranking for Notre Dame will probably tell us more than any other ranking in terms of how this committee views the losses and how are they going to really penalize teams for losing to bad teams, or does it really just not? We've seen at times in the past, it doesn't really matter who you lose to, it just matters about who you beat. So that is really going to be interesting to see what they do there. But let's go to the top 10 now. I've got SMU at number 10. They should be higher. Again, following the criteria, this SMU team should be probably at 5 or 6. I think they should be, because they have a better resume than Penn State and Texas. So I think they should actually be ahead of both of those teams, but I don't think they will be. They've got the win over Pitt. A one-loss Pitt team also wins over Louisville, Duke, and a 4-loss TCU. They put together some pretty good wins. And their loss came to BYU, who is, again, I think they should be at number 4 if they rank these teams correctly, but I don't think they will. Still, I think they're going to have them at number 7, as you see. And so that's a quality win, or, they didn't lose to a bad team. So SMU should actually be higher than this, but I've got them at 10. I think that's where they will wind up. Tennessee at number 9. Tennessee should be behind SMU, but I don't think they will be, because they're going to give them a ton of credit for beating Alabama. They've also got wins over NC State, Oklahoma, Florida, but not a lot of great wins. Really, just that Alabama win is what I think is going to give them that top 10 ranking. Indiana at number 8. Now, they don't have any great wins, but they've been very impressive, and they've beaten 3 4-loss teams, Maryland, Nebraska, and Washington. They've also got 3 other wins in the conference, UCLA, Michigan State, Northwestern. Not great wins, but 6 wins in the conference is pretty solid, and the way they've been winning those games, I think Indiana comes in at number 8. BYU ahead of them at 7 because their resume is better. Again, a win over a 1-loss SMU, a 2-loss Kansas State, also a 4-loss Baylor, and they haven't lost a game. So BYU, again, in my opinion, they have a better resume than Miami, Penn State, Texas, all teams that I have ranked ahead of them in the projection. But if we were going by the criteria, I do believe BYU would be number 4. I had them ranked a lot higher in the top 25s that I've been doing. And by the way, I'm going to do a top 25 later today that will not be about the resume. I'm simply just going to rank the teams based on how good they are. So watch for that video later today. But we've got Texas at number 6. Really, they don't have much of a resume. I mean, they just don't. But they lost to Georgia, who's a top 5 team, and I think the committee is not going to penalize them too much for that. The win over Vanderbilt is solid. Wins over Michigan and Oklahoma. Again, I don't know for sure what this committee is going to do. How much are they going to make you, do you got to have quality wins? Or if you lose to a really good team, are they going to say, well, we're not going to penalize you for that loss because you lost to a good team? That's what we're going to find out tomorrow night. But let's get to the top 5 here. I think this is what it's going to look like. I believe Penn State will be at number 5. Because again, they lost to Ohio State. That's our number 2 team in these projections. They've got a win over a 3-loss Illinois, 4-loss West Virginia, 4-loss Wisconsin. I think that's where Penn State's going to be. Miami undefeated at 9-0. I think they'll be number 4. Wins over a 3-loss Duke and Louisville team. The Louisville Louisville win, I think, will be good for them. I think the Cardinals will be ranked, like I showed you, so that'll be their signature win. Also wins over some 4-loss teams, Virginia Tech, Florida, and Cal. And then, of course, the big thing is that they have not lost a game. But if we're really looking at resume, BYU should be ahead of Miami. I don't think the committee's going to do that, but I think that they should. Georgia at number 3. A win over Texas is big. The Clemson win is solid. A win over Florida. They haven't really passed the eye test at times, but at times they have. Like if you look at the Texas game, you look at the second half of the Clemson game. But I think the losing to Alabama. So really what it comes down to with Ohio State and Georgia, because Ohio State has the win over Penn State, Georgia has the win over Texas, Georgia has the win over Clemson, and then Ohio State's next best win is Iowa. So in the wins column, Georgia has a slight advantage, but I think Ohio State, because they lost on the road to the number 1 team versus Georgia losing to the number 13 team, I think that is why Ohio State will be 2. But if the committee cares more about the wins, I think Georgia will be 2. So that'll be another thing to watch for there. Buckeyes, though, at number 2, and Oregon at number 1. A very solid resume. No losses. Wins over Boise State and Ohio State. Also a 3-loss Illinois team, a 4-loss Michigan team. I don't think there's really any debate there. Oregon will be number 1. So that's how I think the rankings are going to look tomorrow night. I think it'll be very close to that. We'll have a reaction video more than likely to see how accurate we were. And again, my top 25 coming later today, where I'm just going to rank these teams based off of how good I think they are and who would win in a head-to-head matchup if they played this week. So watch for that video as well. Give me your projections. How do you think the committee is going to rank these teams? Let me know down in the comments below.